that's why. Okay.
Brilliant, perfect. Thanks, Jules. And so I'm going to be taking it over from here. Thank you, everyone. Very happy to be co-facilitating this with Chris. So I'm Ellie, the Thought Leadership Specialist at NDN. I'm sure you've seen me before. And yeah, I guess the ambition we have for the next 30, 40 minutes, let's say, is to give a brief pragmatic overview for what's to come in 2024, starting the new year off right, looking funding-wise from key donors.
That's right.
Yeah, so we'll be looking at the outlook from some major donors and the global funding trends. And for more tailored advice, you can reach out to our funding support team on our website, as we will be touching on the major donors and giving an overall pragmatic view.
Cool.
So yeah, I'll let you pick it off now, Chris, with the reaching tipping point.
Great. Okay. Thanks so much, Ellie. So as we are trying to focus on a few donors in half an hour, the purpose, as Ellie rightly said, is to provide everybody with the briefest of update as we hit into the Easter break just before. And all that is happening in front of a background of reaching tipping point, really. Many donor nations, including the US, are expected to likely turn inward faster. Ellie will give us later an update from the forecast that USAID has just published yesterday and some information from our engagement with them directly. But we need to expect the institutional donors, the governmental donors, to slash the aid budget. Many recipient countries are becoming far more challenging partners as well, with some recipient countries in Eastern Africa and far East Asia becoming more restrictive of the civic space and inflows of grants and donors. We've seen individual approvals even being necessary. That is all happening in front of the background of nearly 300 million people needing humanitarian assistance, a quarter of the world living in fragile environments, and all that is happening with rapid developments in artificial intelligence that is changing how actually donors operate. And I've got an interesting viewpoint here from our German side here later. So that's the somewhat mixed bag and not so positive background in front of which our colleagues at the donor agencies are planning for the rest of the year. So let's have a look more concretely into what they are doing. The humanitarian need is at an all-time high, not just in the Middle East, Gaza, but also elsewhere. And clearly here in Germany, as well as over in the US, Ali, I think you're covering that in a few minutes. But what they have in common is that the agencies internally, they're really struggling with that. By sheer number of staff not being there yet, the humanitarian budget rising, there's the USAID's humanitarian budget having doubled in the last 3 years from 5 to 10 billion. In Germany, we see that as well, that the humanitarian budget is set to increase by a double percentage amount. We're yet to wait for that because the need is so high, not just in Ukraine, but also in host populations of refugees. And the fear we have is that this is a little bit at the operational expense of long-term development work. And that's certainly being discussed in circles outside the donor agencies as well, in philanthropic circles, impact investor circles, and the multi-financial institutions, where the donors that were previously very much leading development work seem to have fallen a bit quiet over the last year, possibly resulting from the humanitarian need. So if you're a humanitarian organization, great. Or if you do humanitarian work, they are certainly increases here that nowhere near the need. But if you are in the more long-term side, or you work in this development piece and humanitarian nexus, then we probably need to expand a little bit on our donor side. Oops, sorry, there we are. So within donors, there's a lot of change. happening right now. USAID continues to cement localization. I think, Ali, you're providing an update later about them doing some very interesting things about making it easier as well, including verbal presentations. I think you told me that's wow. The UK FCDO has that's FCDO that should supposed to mean has a chance here to lead on cash transfer and payment of results. There is no budget increase here though, and in fact, I would argue that the reality is that the UK Foreign Office has been growing at the expense of the development part of it. So I think the development capacity and the UK as a donor capacity has diminished over the last 3 to 4 months. Germinate is on the increase. There is no elections this year, unlike anywhere else, it seems. So this has we have a chance to cement the increase from 22 to 23 right now. However, GIZ, KfW, and BMZ are again internally working a little slower than I have seen last year or the year before, because whilst the budget now is there, the regulations and the rules which they have to comply are also still there. Normally this time of year, so March, April, we see lots of signature programs coming out just before Easter. That hasn't happened this time around. So we're expecting that to happen in May, June time right now, just before the summer break, I'm certain. Development banks are, interestingly, they're really driving these development agendas right now. So if you're in a development area, the ERBD, the European Bank of Rebuilding and Reconstruction, is an interesting one. Other MFIs are also pushing more and more into this development space. If you're not monitoring them already, then I would highly recommend you start doing so. As reported in January already, venture philanthropists and impact investors are exceeding that of bilateral donors right now. The total market here for impact investors is over $1 trillion US right now. And many are unhappy with the lack of impact they can show. Merely pointing to some SDGs is not enough for various philanthropists and impact investors. So here we have a chance to show that as development experts that we define impact much more tighter, much more down to the grassroots level than a rough direction and a contributing to the SDGs is. Happy to have a conversation about that. That's what I do all day. And that's pretty much the change here. There's a lot happening in the space right now, under a lot of pressure, as I said. But let's take a look into the individual donors after we've been briefly going through the funding principles that I'd like to remind you on. Now, my colleagues and I around the world, we're supporting a fair number of NGOs with funding diversification. And whilst a lot is always feels good and getting a lot of applications out is good, I would say I would like to remind everybody, some of you who might be working with us already, that the right donors are the more important ones. So we are usually across the band aiming for 15 to 30% unrestricted to be financially stable, if not sustainable. That obviously varies massively depending on where you work, what type of work you do, and where you are, where your reserves are right now. But that's the average reserve level or the unrestricted income level that we've seen amongst our 300 or so partners. Actively managing large donors and adding 2 new ones per year is also a good way of success. So your business development is successful, I would say, if you add 2 new donors, regardless of what amount per year. Happily take a question on that later, if that's interesting. A very obvious way to improve your business development is simply to minimize the cost of proposal development. So standardization, productization of your approach is extremely important, as it simply allows you to send more applications out. Now, more isn't always better, as I said just now, but there is a relationship to number in terms of the amount of proposals we send versus the amount of proposals we secure. So it doesn't get more simple than that. And finally, lots of our partners are interested in, and some do, like Risico, they do get into the impact investment space. Here, we need a very different approach. If there are questions at the end of this the next 20 minutes, then I'll happily talk about that. But with that being said, let's take a look at USAID looking at after we've looked at the overall funding trends. So we know we are looking at localization from USAID. We talked about impact investments that are increasing in developing countries. They are diminishing overall this year. This is backlash from COVID, but in developing countries, there is a double-digit increase. And I think it's fair to say that the EU is sort of back on track, having been very late with a lot of signature programs coming out last year. We are finally noticing an increase in procurement and in RFIs and RFPs going out. So that's really, really good. What's interesting as well is that, and Ali, maybe you can mention that, tell me what USAID is thinking, but the EU certainly, and the German side, as well as the over the channel with the British donors, they are really keen to co-create proposals. We've seen lots more requests for informations than we have seen requests for proposals. I think that's at least personally, I don't have any data to this one, but that seems to be this co-creation mechanism, aligning with getting the experts in the room, getting the NGOs in the room, and then co-creating a program even before going out to purchase is something that they're really pushing on. And even Brussels is now doing that more and more so. So the big picture then, before we dive into USAID, is that we've seen a moderately increasing public budget from the donors. Now, the DAC donors have increased by about 5% since 2022. That's about $500 million or 500 million US dollar. That's inflation, that's keeping in step with inflation, so that's not bad. Some donors like the UK, of course, have reduced massively. Some donors like Germany have increased considerably. And that the overall picture here for all the DAC donors, therefore, is a 5% increase. Not all the data from 2022 is out yet. For example, the Danish, they are still late in reporting to the OECD. But that is not going to change the big picture massively. There's also an increase in foundation budgets. So foundations and private philanthropists, they've increased by around 15% or about $1.5 billion, again, based on the 2022 data. I'd recommend that anybody who is interested more in foundations and private donors has a look at our top 100 foundation list that is coming to download in April. And you can register your interest in that link over there by just sending us an email, and we'll let you know when that is being published or when that is ready. I know my colleagues are working frantically on that. Going down the way from public to private funds, venture philanthropy, the overall estimated market, as I just mentioned, is now reaching 1.2 billion US dollar. That is absolutely massive. So 1.1 trillion or 1,156 billion US dollar. Venture philanthropy, which is an impact investment, and I appreciate the lines are fluid, is estimated to have another 450 billion. So you can, depending on your mission in your country, you can add to that. A lot of this we've noticed increases in West and in East Africa. So there's a bit of a hole in the middle, particularly Ethiopia, Kenya, very strong, as well as Ghana, Nigeria, and Cote d'Ivoire being quite strong here. There was a drip, sort of a dip, that's supposed to mean, not a drip. There was supposed to be a dip in 2023 where that has reduced, but mostly in the DAC countries again. So in developing countries, we've seen actually above 20% increase in FDI and in venture philanthropy being deployed. based on 2022 again. If you have a pitch and if you're interested in attracting a venture philanthropy or an impact investor, then please use this link to submit your pitch, and we'll see if we get it into the quarterly funding round. But I hope I didn't consume too much time, Ellie, because
No, that's perfect.
Is it?
Absolutely. Thanks for the big picture look, Chris. And I guess now, yeah, let's look at the individual donor agencies, starting with the single world's largest donor, that is USAID. As you mentioned already, they are continuing to cement localization, but let's take a look at the rest of the trends, some of which are very new and were mentioned for the first time in their quarterly business forecast meetings, which the latest took place yesterday, and that's at the top of the list here. You see that they are focusing on, it's called a burden reduction program, and that is for implementing partners, and that basically means that they're trying to decrease the compliance barriers that we know that prevent local organizations from being competitive for USAID partnership opportunities. So this program, it aims to cut down applicants' time, burden when submitting complex solicitations, and just generally laying out the playing field for local organizations. And the ways that they plan on doing this is they're going to be allowing oral presentations, also using simplified evaluation criteria, and releasing requests for information and sending draft solicitations for industry comment. The next is that they are focusing on capacity strengthening for local organizations. Yeah, and that is in line with putting local actors in the lead. And then the other trends are consistent with our last update as of last year, which is staff shortages are persisting. Let's expect a push on the mid-size and local agencies. And then the thematic focuses. So they have been bringing out climate finance programs, accelerating climate action initiatives. And in yesterday's business forecast meeting, they, Samantha Power, proposed a $3 billion for climate action budget, focused on clean energy, forest conservation, and disaster resilience, absolutely needed. Secondly, as was similar in the last update, they're focusing on private sector engagement, also building and expanding digital programs. And then localization is taking center stage as always. And
that 3 billion, was that just released yesterday then?
Yes, I believe so.
Wow, cool, thanks.
Yeah.
I know that's been a long time coming. I didn't know it was finally out. That's great.
Yeah, and then on the boosting economic growth, they are including a 2.2 billion for their USAID programs for growth and innovation, which is great. And yeah, lastly on the list is addressing food security challenges. Yeah, and then on the next slide, we look at their announced fiscal year budget for 2025. So it's 42.8 billion for foreign assistance, of which 28 billion is for USAID fully and partially managed accounts. And they also added focus regions. So number one, ensuring Russia's strategic failure in Ukraine. And they have a 482 million on that to support Ukraine. Second, supporting the people of the Middle East. So they've allocated a 7.6 billion for the Middle East, and 2 billion of that managed by USAID, and that is to support stability and prosperity for the region. And then lastly, they're also focusing on investing in the Indo-Pacific region. Yeah,
which is interesting because that's the region the EU has basically, I wouldn't say retracted, but is doing less about right now. So in that region, in the Indo-Pacific. And just for everybody here, Ellie, do you mind if I just clarify? I know you're very into USAID. In case you're wondering what fully and partially managed accounts means, there's a bit of donor talk there. The 28.3 billion must refer then, Ellie, to procurement happening under USAID, whereas the rest of the balance, that's 14 billion, up to the 42.8, is basically subcontracted to development contractors to then procure on their procurement procedures. So just in case anybody's wondering what is the difference between fully and partially managed and what is not.
Absolutely. Thanks for clearing that up, Chris. And
That's a
then
problem with these experts, you know.
absolutely. Simplified language, yeah. And then looking at strategy guide. So yeah, if you would like to go through this slide, Chris.
Yeah, sure, happily. So on USAID, when we spoke to them in December or January, was it, Ali? I can't remember.
December, I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, where we spoke to them directly. I'm not sure that's published, or has it? I think it has been published in a talk. They were really saying, look, if you want to partner with USAID, watch out for the programmatic and the geographic fit to be absolutely right. That is the first priority. They're still getting lots of application where that isn't quite right. They are moving quite fast, even, and I think that's right now. There seems to be movement happening as it happens with the EU right now. So that engagement, that co-creation is really important. To join their online events. They're doing quite a lot to unburden us, even by verbal presentations now. I'm not sure that doesn't just mean an additional burden. You know, you do a verbal presentation in addition to a written one, but we'll see how that ends up. And if you're new to USAID, just bear in mind that the core of the programs, the thematic areas that Ali just presented, they're probably going to stay the same. But be aware that they have a new head of acquisition and assistance that is likely to result in some changes to their procurement procedure later this year, and obviously the election is happening. And pragmatically, if you're not yet, we highly recommend that you register on their new website, workwithusaid.org, and where you can engage. That is particularly and especially designed for local and small organizations. And don't forget that at the right time to prepare a NICRA application. Otherwise, you end up in the de minimis range of 10%, which is very difficult to run a program on. Although we understand that they're looking to increase that range slightly, but we don't know to what yet. Oh, that's me. Shall I move on from Brussels?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Cool. So the main priorities on 2024 remain planet prosperity and peace. That is really what they have done for the 2020 current plan up to 2027. It's basically environmental and resource depletion. Interestingly enough, Brussels has taken on the German language here, talking more about climate change mitigation and adaptation, and less about climate change prevention anymore. It's a sad progression of events. There are, again, in lockstep with a lot of nature-based solutions. So we've seen a lot more funding going into indigenous and nature-based solutions, renewable agriculture and tech. That seems to be getting a lot of support right now. So if you are in this area, then focusing on the EU funds is likely to be more successful. And on peace, there is obviously the continued peace programs and peace mediation, focusing mostly now on the former Yugoslavia as well as the area of influence, which is Eastern Europe, as well as Latin America, interestingly enough. There are elections happening in June. That is not, I know that is a big message out there that we have elections here, but bear in mind that the EU development funding cycle goes till 2027, so we don't expect that too many questions. We have had lots of questions from you and from others about eligibility. The completion of Brexit, and would you be eligible under this and that? And we've included the link where you can contact the EU directly or just ask one of our EU advisors, of course. But that link also answers questions, and they are reasonably responsive. So they're pretty good. Overall, the EU, I'd like to highlight the sustainable agriculture program here. Renewable, sustainable agriculture, as well as industrial development and job creation, as well as labor, are receiving a lot of support. that's been on the plan since 2023, but we are expecting applications to go out and RFIs to become public in June, May, June this year. So please watch out for those. Quick look at the foundations, and then we're nearly out of time, I believe. I'd like to have a quick look at the Gates Foundation. Not that this is not known to you, but they are one of the ones that have increased in funding from this year, actually. They continue to look at gender equality, global development, growth, health, of course, is their domestic one. Now, interestingly enough, they've now finally confirmed that 90% of their awardees are implementing agencies. So they're a little bit, what I would say, ahead of the localization curve here. They are funding INGOs and northern-based NGOs as far as they are facilitating the investment. So they are looking for the platform NGO, to use their language, to help the local partners implement. But really, the majority of the funding should go with them. They've also revitalized and increased funding to their strategic investment fund, where they want to work with founders and investors directly for job creation, particular for, again, agriculture, for gender equality, recognizing that working through the marketplace is probably a more sustainable basis. Key countries have a new entry in that Ethiopia has increased a lot there, and the top funding directions for the Gates Foundation is now India, Nigeria, Pakistan, Kenya, Ethiopia, in that order. And they've confirmed that they're looking at another budget increase in 2024. Bear in mind that there's a likely much higher budget increase happening in 25, 26, or 27 with the contribution of Berkshire Hathaway into the Gates Foundation. We don't know when that's happening, but it's certainly a donor here to stay. There are some foundations which have decreased their funding last year, and they're continuing to decrease it, like the Jeff Bezos Earth Fund has had a massive slash to its budget. But here, the top 4 organizations that have increased their budget from 23 to 24 and have confirmed that. It again includes Gates, the Wellcome Fund, CIF, or the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, and the Rockefeller Foundation. After a few years of contraction, is back at the increases there again. So those are the ones where there's growing budget, and with growing budget, there's probably room for more partners. Looking at the Germans, the feminist foreign policy is really taking shape right now. They've reached their 90% plus of their funding that should have a primary or secondary gender equality focus. So anything going to the GIZ should really mention and have a particular focus on gender equality here. They are increasing their budget once again after the US. Germany is now the second largest global donor individually, obviously not as large as the EU, but as individual donors. If you count individual countries, then after the US, Germany is now quite large. There is a political will to increase soft spending, as I use it, as I say, in line with hard spending, and with Germany having to invest so much into its military. There is a lot of talk about increasing funding to diplomatic, cultural, and development exchange. We haven't seen concrete figures yet, and with the economy slightly on the low side, I don't see how that is happening this year. But it's certainly a conversation that enjoys bipartisan support. So if not this year, then hopefully in a few years, if and when the economy is taking off again. So we are looking at a potential slight reduction based on economic input here happening in 24-25. That depends, of course, on the elections that are happening as well next year. But budget changes are very, very difficult for new governments to do. So it's not like in the UK or the US. There's a bit more administrative hurdles and therefore stability. A new government can't just slash a budget like this. So even if there's an election, the impact on the aid budget should be marginal. That goes, both ways, up or down. And at the bottom, we've repeated the number the 5 top themes. I'm very conscious of time here. We've promised you 20 minutes, half an hour, and we've just broken the half an hour level. This is supposed to be a brief summary. Ellie, I think you just wanted to communicate our new training courses.
Actually, I was going to, Chris.
Oh, go for it, Jules.
Sorry, you've got a team of women here.
Yeah, sorry.
We normally a great team of women in your in the MZN. But anyway, we are very excited about launching our brand new online training courses. So we are launching next month with 2 online training courses, Right-Winning Proposals and Financial Health and Resilience for Nonprofit Organizations. We are very excited about this because it means these courses can now be accessible to anyone around the world rather than being in specific countries. We are, of course, still running our in-person training courses, and we would love for you to look at our website and join us in person, but we are making these courses more accessible to everyone around the world. So please do take a look at our website and register online. You can pre-book your spot now, and it will be launched live within the next couple of weeks. So we are very excited.
Whoa, big. Yeah, and finally, do stay in touch. So we've broken the half an hour limit. I hope this was useful. We didn't cover all the donors there yet, of course, for good reasons. Next quarterly update will happen just before the summer break with news from Germany, where we should have some signature programs starting. And if you are need some more information about this, please do bear in mind that our mission here at MZN is basically to build well-working, professionally managed, and well-funded NGOs. If we can help you in that, by all means, reach out to Ellie or me, or take a look at our blog, podcasts, and events out there that Jules is always maintaining and pushing out there. And then we have 10-15 minutes for questions. Is that right?
Yes, and we're also just going to let you know about the next upcoming
webinars.
Yeah. Sorry, Chris. Before you jump off there. So our next webinar is Write Better Proposals to Secure Better Funding. This is always a very popular webinar. So please do hop onto our website and sign up for this. And then getting your funding strategy right is in May, just before summer arrives in the Northern Hemisphere. So please do register and sign up before your summer holidays. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinars.
Cool. Now we get to the questions.
Now we are ready for questions. We actually only have one question in the Q&A.
I feel like lots of people are on holiday already. Is that right?
Yes, there are. Yeah, it is Easter weekend. So happy Easter to everyone if you're celebrating. And Eid is in 2 weeks. So fasting, everything's happening at the moment. So the first question was from Katie. Can you share the details of the new USAID climate commitments?
Yes, I can, absolutely. I think what's best, I can find their latest update and share the link. I think that would be best.
Okay, fantastic.
Ali, because a lot of people will have missed the update from USAID yesterday, is that something we could send out when we send out the slides to everybody?
Yes, the slides aren't available, but the transcript of the conversation is, so we can see if we can include that in our post webinar mailer, Jules. Maybe that's possible.
Yeah, we certainly can. There's only one more question from Willow. Could we share the cost of the online courses? So our launching price is €475 per course. So we are very excited by that. So please do register. And we look forward to hosting you on our online courses. They will be interactive. So we are very excited about what's to come with MZN International.
And can I just take a minute to explain that the way that our MZN business model as a social enterprise work is that we will always invest, recover the cost over the next few years, and then make our service progressively cheaper. So William, you should be able in sort of 2 years, 3 years, see those prices going down rather than up.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, a few more questions have popped in, so I'm just going to get through them. So would you be able to very quickly give slightly more information on these signature programs from GIZ in May June?
Yeah, William, I can do. The GIZ in close cooperation with the BMZ. So bear in mind that Germany has several major donor agencies, have been late in pushing out their major programs in the first quarter of this year, down to various things. There are larger signature programs happening in East Africa for Tibet, the technical vocational training, that we are expecting to come out April, maybe, I'm not sure, May, June latest. I mean, they must be getting them out before the summer break, really. And we are expecting a larger program on women financial inclusion that is set to be global and mostly delivered via digital means as well. So that could be an interesting one as well. And then there's a health program happening in Eastern Europe that is also receiving a large percentage part of the GIZ proposal. If you are more interested, William, please do reach out to me, and I'll and from which organization you are writing, then I can see whether there is a match there.
Great, thanks, Chris. Pascal has just asked about climate finance. So climate finance is for some time growing. Could you be a bit more specific on this? Are there trends in specific areas of growth within the thematic area?
So Pascal, great to see you again. The funding where we get most interest from our impact donors and our venture philanthropists particularly is obviously clean tech as an energy provision. There's an acknowledgement led by the USAID conference actually in January, where we need a massive amount of infrastructure investment into clean tech in order to produce carbon reduced or carbon free energy. That is happening, that is receiving a bulk of the funding from the venture philanthropists and the impact investors. Other than that, we have climate mitigation and adaptation fund. There's the global loss facility that is supposed to be managed, I think, by the World Bank. That is not operational yet. It has been reinforced and it has received consent at the last COP, but it is not running yet. It's supposed to be a multi-billion fund. I forgot the figure that came out of Abu Dhabi, I think, or Qatar was the COP. We are looking at what the distribution measure is. Bear in mind that the World Bank was also extremely reluctant to take on the management of that. So I'm afraid they are scuttled with it now. They have to do it. Maybe in the next quarterly update or latest at the end of the year, we get some interesting information from Ellie on the US side of how they're managing that.
Great, thanks, Chris. Quite a few questions are popping in. We only have 5 minutes left, so we will do our best to get through all of these.
And if not, please let your email address and we'll get back to you by email.
Yeah, I was going to say, if we do not have time, please do email us. Thanks, Chris. So Zubaida, do you have any funding insights on nutrition? Which donors are likely to increase or decrease their funding for this sector?
I don't off the top of my head. We do funding specific updates. There's, I think, water. What else on the website, Jules? Help me out. There's a water list.
Yes, we've got
gender equality list as well.
I think Ellie can help us out here. She's very good.
Yeah. There was water insecurity, gender, women empowerment, education. Yeah, but we haven't done one on nutrition as of yet. We can definitely put that in the priority list. I know there's an ever-growing list of thematic areas that we see a demand to bring out these donor lists in, and nutrition is one of those.
Cool. Can I just jump on the next 5 minutes, Jules? I appreciate that Ricardo just asked about strategies aiming for small donors or for small grants. Ricardo, on the 22nd of April, jointly with Bond, we're doing a webinar specifically on breaking into new donors. That might be interesting for you. So if you don't know where to sign up, please let us have an email and we'll get that over to you.
Great, thanks. What are your thoughts about SIDA's decision to discontinue multi-annual agreements with civil society organizations? What can be expected in 2025?
Interesting. So Stanka is referring here to Sweden. Sweden has taken an absolute wrecking ball in the last 2 weeks to its overseas development assistance, discontinuing its multi-annual agreements with its 11 or so or 12 or so main donors. That is very bad news for the Nordic donors. But bear in mind, it is simply the same that than DFID the UK has done years ago, and something that has happened in France as well, where the multi-annual agreements and the standard funding that is awarded to a small number of NGOs has been discontinued. I think the way they've done this is really quite harsh. Announcing this one with a pretty short timeline as well. But what it means is that the funding here from the Nordic donor, from CEDAR, is becoming short-term, and you need to apply for it more competitively. That said, their overall ODA budget is also set to decrease, and they are spending most of their money now on defense. So after years of stagnation, I would not consider CEDAR to be a particularly growth donor here anymore. Maybe not the best way to invest your time and money into it right now. But bear in mind, sorry, on the other side, bear in mind that Sweden in particular hosts a really active community of impact investors. So compared to, say, the southern part of Europe, that part is really, really active. So that might be a strategy change here for you.
Great, thank you. And then Palmer actually asked a question that follows on about Sweden and the decrease. It's what are the implications in the rest of Europe?
Palmer, I don't know. Ali, I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on that. It's not like they are copying it. Sweden was never a massive ODA donor, and bear in mind it was also very domestic. Like you almost needed to be Swedish in order to get funded by Swedish. On the multi-annual agreement, they've done a lot of localization and a lot of funding in country, but large-scale multi-annual assignments were always very, they looked very Swedish, put it this way. I don't know what the impact on the rest of Europe is. I do expect, as I said, from the German side, that we are expecting a stagnating or slightly reduced effective development budget for the next couple of years. That said, Sweden is on a reverse trend from its feminist foreign policy principles that have been reversed to its now reversing trend on ODA. So it's what I would set in that initial conversation. The first slide I just showed, it's more of an inward-looking country right now, with it leaving certain countries even. Okay,
great. Thanks, Chris. We've actually gotten through all the Q&A. There was one or two comments in the chat, so maybe we can just finish with this comment. From Rith, it says it seems a few donors are increasing their funding recently. Are there any insights or thoughts about the projection over the next 5 years?
I'm sorry, I didn't get this acoustically. I haven't got the chat open. Jules, can you say?
Sorry, it seems a few donors are increasing their funding recently. Are there any insights or thoughts about the projection over the next 5 years?
I mean, look, no, I wouldn't be so bold to say publicly, here's a projection. I do know that funding can be more volatile in the US and in the UK, as it's more rules and confined in Germany, for example, where a government cannot just unilaterally change a already approved budget. So that provides some stability in the notice period, so to speak, of funding line. I do think that there's a ton of operational challenges at donors right now. Clearly, they have the budget, but they're not getting it out. And I do think that as an NGO, but I've been saying this for 2-3 years, we need to seriously look at fostering consortia between institutional donors on the one side, development banks and multinational financial institutions on the other side, and those traditional donors. I think over long term, the days of taking a grant and having that fully fund a program, they are coming to an end. So I think we need to create more and more of these basket funds with various donors, which makes it more complicated.
Thank you, Chris and Ellie, for your fantastic presentation today. Thank you for everyone joining us from around the world. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. And if you are celebrating Easter, have a blessed holiday. And if you are celebrating Eid, may you also have a fantastic time with your family.
Thank you so much, everybody. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.